The Montana night had teeth. 28 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't sound like much until you're 6 years old with one leg and you've been walking for 7 hours straight through darkness. So complete it feels like the world ended somewhere behind you and forgot to tell the stars. Lorelei Grace Ashford stopped at the edge of the tree line and looked back the way she'd come. 17 miles. She knew because she had counted, not in miles because miles were too big and too abstract for a mind trying very hard not to break apart from fear, but in smaller things. Telephone poles, fence posts, the rhythm of her crutches against frozen ground. Step, swing, step, swing, step, swing. A sound that had become her heartbeat, her prayer, her only companion in the dark. Her breath came out in white clouds that disappeared almost before they formed. The pink jacket she wore, the one with the little hearts on the zipper pull that she'd gotten from a church donation box 2 years ago, was 2 sizes too small. It had been the right size once. Before. Before the accident that wasn't an accident. Before the hospitals with their different stories. Before she'd learned that adults lie and the ones who lie best are the ones everyone believes. The jacket's left sleeve had a stain on it that looked black in the moonlight, but Lorelei knew was actually dark brown. Blood from 3 months ago when Vincent had grabbed her arm hard enough to reopen the surgical scars. He'd apologized after. He always apologized after. That's what made him so good at it. She could see lights ahead now. A building low and long with yellow windows that promised warmth and people, and the thing she needed most, which was not food, though God knew she was hungry, but witnesses. People who would see. People who would make it harder for Vincent to just take her back like nothing had happened, like she was a lost dog that wandered off and needed returning to its owner. The sign said Rosie's Roadside Diner in red neon that buzzed and flickered in a way that suggested it had been doing this since before Lorelei was born, before her mother was born, maybe before anyone currently alive could remember a time when it wasn't there. She adjusted her crutches. The aluminum was so cold it burned through the worn tape wrapped around the grips. Her right leg, the one she still had, felt like it belonged to someone else, numb below the knee. She'd read about frostbite in one of the library books she'd memorized back when she thought knowledge might save her. Before she learned that sometimes knowledge just tells you exactly how you're going to die. 56 days. That's how long Vincent needed to wait. 56 days until the contestability period on the life insurance policy expired. After that, the insurance company couldn't investigate. After that, $310,000 would be his free and clear, no questions asked. All he had to do was wait for her to die, or help it along, gently, carefully, in ways that doctors would call complications from her amputation. Malnutrition leading to infection, leading to sepsis, leading to a small closed casket, and people saying, what a tragedy, that poor man, he tried so hard. Lorelei had done the math. November 28th, Thanksgiving week. Vincent probably thought that was poetic. The whole family gathered around a table grateful for what they had, while he pretended to mourn the daughter he'd murdered. She pulled the crumpled paper from her jacket pocket. Even in the dark, she could read it because she'd read it so many times the words had burned themselves into her brain. Life insurance contestability period. 2 years from policy issue date. She'd printed it at the library 6 days ago. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, had asked what she was researching, and Lorelei had said a school project about financial planning. Mrs. Patterson had smiled and said, "That's very advanced for second grade." And Lorelei had smiled back and thought, "You have no idea what second grade looks like when you're planning your own survival." The parking lot was half full. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, which meant the church crowd would be filtering in soon for their after-service coffee and pie. Good. More witnesses. Lorelei counted the cars. 19. Call it 40 people inside, maybe. 40 chances for someone to see. 40 chances for someone to care. 40 chances for someone to say yes. She took a breath that hurt all the way down and started across the parking lot. Step, swing, step, swing. The automatic doors sensed her and opened with a pneumatic sigh. Warm air rushed out and hit her face like a physical thing. She almost cried right there, just from the warmth, just from the simple mercy of air that didn't bite. The diner was exactly what she'd hoped for. Bright, loud, full of ordinary people doing ordinary things, eating breakfast, reading newspapers, talking about weather and football and anything at all except how easy it is to let a child die quietly. A waitress looked up from behind the counter. Older woman, maybe 60, with hair dyed the kind of red that nature never intended, and eyes that had seen everything worth seeing and some things that weren't. Her name tag said Rita. She saw Lorelei and her hand stopped halfway to the coffee pot. Just stopped. Froze there in midair like someone had hit pause on the universe. Lorelei knew what Rita was seeing. A 6-year-old girl, maybe 60 pounds if you counted the crutches, blonde hair that hadn't seen a brush in 8 days matted in places, coming loose from the elastic band that barely held it back. Face too thin, cheekbones starting to show through like architecture, like the skull was getting impatient. Eyes that should have been bright blue and probably were once, but had faded to something closer to gray, the color of used dishwater, the color of hope running out. And the leg, or the place where the leg should be. The left side of her jeans pinned up and empty, swinging slightly with each movement of the crutches. Rita's face did something complicated. Pity and horror, and the very specific shame of an adult watching another adult's failure play out in front of her. Then she looked away, put her hand back on the coffee pot, poured a cup for a trucker who wasn't paying attention. Lorelei had expected this, had prepared for it even. But expecting a thing and experiencing it are not the same, and somewhere in her chest, something small and vital curled up tighter. She scanned the room. 38 people by her count. Families, couples, solo diners, the Sunday morning cross-section of Clearwater County, Montana. People who went to church and sang about loving thy neighbor, and then went to diners and looked away from children who needed help. Lorelei picked her first table. A couple in their 60s matching fleece jackets, a road atlas spread between them. Planning a trip, maybe. Retirement adventures. The woman had kind eyes. That's what Lorelei told herself. Kind eyes meant a kind person, meant someone who would help. She approached slowly, carefully, making sure they could hear the crutches, making sure they had time to prepare themselves. The man looked up first, saw her. His expression flickered through surprise, concern, calculation, and then settled into something that looked like kindness, but wasn't not really. It was the mask people wore when they had already decided no, but wanted to feel like good people anyway. Lorelei stopped 3 feet from their table, close enough to be heard, far enough that she wasn't threatening. She'd learned the distance in hospitals with doctors who would lean back in their chairs if she got too close, who would look at Vincent instead of her when she tried to speak. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she'd planned. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Can I sit with you just for a little while?" The woman's kind eyes got kinder, which was how Lorelei knew she was about to say no. "Oh, sweetie." That tone, that horrible, gentle, condescending tone that adults used when they were about to disappoint you and wanted you to know it hurt them more than it hurt you, which was a lie so big it had its own gravity. "Shouldn't you be with your parents?" "I don't have parents," Lorelei said, which was true enough. A mother who left when she was 3. A stepfather who was waiting for her to die. No parents in any way that mattered. "Well, your guardian then, or whoever brought you here." I walked. The kind eyes flickered. Calculation happening behind them. This didn't add up. Something was wrong here, which meant getting involved was complicated, which meant no. "I'm sorry, honey, we're just about to leave." Their food had just arrived. Lorelei didn't argue, didn't plead, just adjusted her crutches and moved to the next table. Behind her, she heard the woman whisper to her husband, "Did you see her leg? Poor thing, someone should call someone, but not loud enough that it counted as actually doing anything." Table 2. 3 women dressed for church in coordinated blouses and careful hair. A Tupperware container of something homemade sat on the edge of the table. Cookies, maybe, or brownies. Food that meant community, meant caring, meant these were women who baked for others, and surely that meant they were good people. Lorelei reached their table. They saw her coming. She watched them see her. Watched the quick exchange glances that were a conversation without words. One of them, the oldest, wearing a silver cross pendant, actually put her hand over her coffee cup, like Lorelei might try to take it. "Excuse me, Lorelei said again. Same words, same quiet desperation underneath. "Can I sit with you just for a little while?" The silver cross woman smiled. It was the worst thing Lorelei had seen all morning, and she'd walked 17 miles through freezing darkness, so the bar was high. Sweetheart. There was that word again. A word that should mean affection, but in that mouth meant distance, meant I'm going to perform caring while doing nothing. "Where's your family?" "I don't have any." "Well, someone must be looking for you." Yes, Lorelei thought. Vincent is looking for me. That's the problem. "No, ma'am," she said out loud. "A little girl like you shouldn't be wandering around alone. It's not safe." Safer than home, Lorelei thought. But she didn't say it because she'd learned that truth made adults uncomfortable, and uncomfortable adults were useless adults. The woman reached into her purse. For a terrible moment, Lorelei thought she was going to give her money, was going to try to solve this with $5 and feel good about herself. But no, she was getting her phone. "I think we should call someone," the woman said to her friends, not to Lorelei. "The church has a family services number." They were going to call someone. They were going to hand her over to a system that would call Vincent because he was her legal guardian and Vincent would come get her. And he would be so sorry, so apologetic, so concerned, and he would take her home and she would die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but before Thanksgiving, before the contestability period ended, before anyone asked questions that mattered. "No, thank you," Lorelei said and moved on. Table 3, a family, father, mother, 2 kids around Lorelei's age. The kind of family that looked like it came from a commercial for breakfast cereal or minivans or the American dream. The father saw her first and immediately shifted in his seat so his body was between her and his children, protecting them from her. From the crippled girl with the haunted eyes who might be contagious, might bring something dark and complicated into their perfect Sunday morning. Lorelei didn't even ask this time, just moved on. Table 4, a truck driver, big guy with a beard wearing a Peterbilt cap. He had his phone out staring at it with the intensity of someone who desperately wished they were anywhere else. He saw her in his peripheral vision. She watched his thumb move faster on the screen, scrolling through. Nothing seeing nothing, the phone just an excuse not to engage. "Sir," Lorelei tried anyway. "Sorry, kid, waiting on a call." The phone wasn't ringing, wasn't even buzzing. But Lorelei moved on because arguing with lies was how you wasted time you didn't have. Table 5. A businessman in his 40s laptop, open papers, spread out the kind of man who brought his work to Sunday breakfast and called it dedication instead of what it really was, which was hiding. "Excuse me." He didn't even look up. "I'm expecting someone." "No, you're not," Lorelei thought. "You've been here 40 minutes and checked your watch twice. Nobody's coming." But she didn't say it, just moved on. Table 6, 2 women teachers maybe, or nurses, professional looking, with matching sensible haircuts, and the kind of low voices that meant they were discussing something important, something that shouldn't be interrupted by reality. Lorelei got within 10 feet and one of them made eye contact. Lorelei saw the decision happen in real time, saw the woman's eyes go from acknowledgement to dismissal in less than a second, saw her lean toward her friend and whisper something, saw them both look away. Lorelei didn't even approach, just turned to table 7. An older man, maybe 70, eating alone, eggs and bacon and hash browns, the kind of breakfast that spoke of routine of coming here every Sunday for 20 years of a life measured in small, reliable pleasures. He had a military bearing, even sitting down. Straight back, careful movements. The kind of man who'd seen things and survived them, and maybe that meant he'd see her too. Lorelei reached his table. He looked up, made eye contact, didn't look away immediately, And for one shining, desperate second, she thought, yes, this is the one who will help. Sir, can I? His eyes dropped, back to his plate, deliberate, decisive. The look away wasn't casual. It was a choice. It was him deciding that whatever was happening with this little girl was not his problem, was not his responsibility, was not something he was going to let into his Sunday morning eggs. I'm sorry, Lorelei finished quietly, though she didn't know what she was apologizing for. For existing, maybe. For needing help. For making him feel bad about himself for 30 seconds. She turned away. 7 tables, 7 rejections, 31 people left. She was starting to understand something terrible. It wasn't that people couldn't see her. They could. They did. It was that seeing her meant acknowledging that the world had room in it for a 6-year-old girl who could be hurt this badly, who could be this alone, and that acknowledgement required action, and action required involvement, and involvement required risk, and risk was something nobody was willing to take on a Sunday morning when they just came in for pancakes. Lorelei continued her circuit, table by table, booth by booth, each approach the same. Each rejection different in its details but identical in its outcome. No, sorry, can't, shouldn't. Someone should call someone. Someone should do something. But not me. Never me. By the time she'd worked her way through half the diner, conversations had started to quiet. People were watching now from the corners of their eyes, tracking her progress, witnessing her systematic rejection by every adult in the room, and still nobody stood up. Still nobody said yes. There was a particular kind of exhaustion that came from this. Not physical, though Lorelei's arms were screaming from the crutches and her remaining leg felt like it might give out any second. This was deeper, cellular. The exhaustion of a body that had been running on survival mode for so long, it was starting to forget what else existed. She reached table 23 and didn't even finish her sentence before the woman there shook her head. Reached table 25, and the man pretended not to hear her at all. 38 people. 38 no's. 38 people who would go home tonight and maybe feel a little bad about the crippled girl at the diner, but not bad enough to have done anything about it. Not bad enough that it would keep them up at night or change how they saw themselves or make them wonder what kind of world they were building where a child could ask for help 38 times and be refused by everyone. Lorelei stopped in the middle of the diner. She was shaking now. From cold or exhaustion or the absolute weight of being 6 years old and completely alone in a room full of people. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry because crying was weakness, and weakness was death. And she had not walked 17 miles through the Montana night to die in a diner surrounded by people who wouldn't look at her. One booth left. Back corner. A man sitting alone. Big. Maybe 6'1", 6'2". Older 60s, probably, though it was hard to tell. Hair gone silver white, but thick. Shoulders broad in a way that spoke of a life lived physically. He wore a black leather vest over a dark gray thermal shirt. The vest had patches, lots of them. A rocker across the top that said Hell's Angels in ornate script. A bottom rocker that said Montana. Other patches that Lorelei didn't understand but that made everyone else in the diner give this booth a wide berth. There was a scar running from his left eyebrow down across his cheekbone, thick and ropey and old. The kind of scar that had a story, and the story was probably violent. His hands were wrapped around a coffee cup. Big hands, knuckles thick and scarred, working hands, hands that had built things and broken things and probably hurt people. Nobody sat near him. The 2 booths on either side were empty, despite the diner being mostly full. He had a newspaper spread on the table, but he wasn't reading it. He was staring out the window at the mountains in the distance, his face expressionless in a way that Lorelei recognized because it was the same way she kept her own face most of the time. Not neutral, not calm, just closed, locked down. Everything important happening below the surface where it couldn't be used against you. This was the most dangerous looking person in the diner. Maybe the most dangerous looking person Lorelei had ever seen outside of movies. Everything about him said, stay away, said trouble. said this is not a man who gets involved in little girls' problems because this is a man with problems of his own that are bigger and darker than anything a 6-year-old could imagine. Lorelei looked at him. Then she looked back at the rest of the diner. At Rita the waitress, who was very carefully not looking at her. At the church women who were whispering prayers that probably included, "Thank God that's not my problem." At the 38 people who had chosen comfort over courage. She looked back at the man in the corner booth. He was still staring out the window, hadn't moved, probably didn't even know she existed. Lorelei's arms trembled on her crutches. She could leave, could walk back out into the cold and try somewhere else. Another diner, another town, another 38 people who would find 38 reasons to say no. Or she could walk to that back booth, could approach the one person in this entire building that everyone else was afraid of, could ask one more time, could face one more rejection and let it be the one that broke her. She started walking. Step, swing, step, swing, step, swing. The rhythm of survival, the soundtrack of her life for 2 years. The sound that would probably be the last thing she heard before the world finally decided she wasn't worth the trouble of keeping alive. The man in the booth heard her coming. She saw his shoulders shift slightly, saw him register the sound of the crutches, but he didn't turn around, didn't look, just kept staring at those mountains like they held answers to questions he'd stopped asking out loud. Lorelei reached his booth, stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be heard, far enough to run if she needed to, though running on crutches was more theory than practice, and they both probably knew it. She stood there, waiting, giving him time to acknowledge her, to tell her to go away before she even asked, to make this rejection quick so she could find somewhere quiet to cry where nobody would see. He didn't turn around. 30 seconds passed, a minute. Lorelei counted the seconds because counting was how she stayed sane. Counted and calculated and kept her mind busy with numbers so it didn't have room for the screaming terror that lived just underneath everything she did. Then he turned, slowly, deliberately. His eyes found hers and held them, and Lorelei understood immediately why everyone stayed away from this booth. It wasn't the scar. It wasn't the vest or the patches or the biker club affiliation. It was the eyes, blue-gray like winter sky, hard like river stones. The eyes of someone who'd seen terrible things and done terrible things and made peace with both. But there was something else there too. Something that took Lorelei a second to identify because she'd seen it so rarely in her life. Recognition, not of her specifically, but of what she was, what she represented. The look of someone who'd been where she was standing, metaphorically if not literally, and survived it and remembered. They looked at each other for a long time. Lorelei doing her calculation, the one she'd been doing since she was 4 years old, and learned that adults came in two categories: the ones who hurt you and the ones who let you be hurt. Trying to figure out which category this man fell into. Trying to decide if the risk of asking was worth the certainty of another no. His eyes moved down, took in the crutches, the too small jacket, the stained sleeve, the thinness of her face, the matted hair. He didn't look away from any of it, didn't flinch or grimace, or do that thing adults did where they saw something painful and immediately tried to unsee it. He just looked, really looked, saw all of it. His eyes came back to hers. Lorelei took a breath that hurt all the way down. "Can I sit with you?" Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. "Just for a little while." The diner noise continued around them. Plates clattering, coffee being poured, conversations about nothing important. A whole world of ordinary Sunday morning that had nothing to do with this moment, this question, this last desperate chance. The man looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them blinked. Then he reached across the booth, picked up the black jacket lying on the opposite seat, moved it deliberately to the floor. "Sit down," he said. His voice was exactly what she expected, low, rough like gravel. The kind of voice that didn't waste words because words were precious, and most of them were lies anyway. Lorelei stood there for another second, processing, making sure she'd heard correctly, making sure this wasn't some kind of setup, some cruel joke the universe was playing where it gave her hope right before yanking it away. But no, the seat was clear. He was waiting. He'd said yes. After 38 no's, someone had said yes. Lorelei moved to the booth. Getting up into it was a practice maneuver that she'd learned to do alone because nobody helped anymore. Prop the crutches against the wall. Brace on the table edge. Hop pull with the right leg while using arm strength to lift. Slide into the seat. Catch your breath because it always took more energy than it should. She settled into the booth. Vinyl seats worn soft from decades of people sitting exactly where she was sitting. The table was scarred with initials and phone numbers and the kind of graffiti that spoke of bored teenagers and late nights. There was a coffee cup in front of the man, three-quarters full, a plate with a Denver omelet that hadn't been touched, a newspaper folded to the sports section. Lorelei folded her hands on the table in front of her, an old habit from when she was younger, and thought that being polite, being good, being small and quiet and grateful would keep her safe. It hadn't, but the habit remained. The man was looking at her, not staring, just steady observation, taking inventory. She let him look. She was used to being looked at. The crutches, the missing leg, the obvious signs of neglect. She'd been a spectacle her whole life. The difference was that most people looked and then looked away as fast as possible. This man just looked, like he was reading a book, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, like he actually gave a damn about the answer. Rita appeared at the booth, the waitress who'd looked away when Lorelei first walked in. She had a menu in her hand and an expression on her face that was complicated. Shame maybe, or concern, or the very specific discomfort of someone who knew they should have done something and didn't, and now had to watch someone else do it instead. "Hey, Ghost," she said to the man, and Lorelei filed that away. Ghost, a nickname, the kind of name that had a story. Rita put the menu down in front of Lorelei. Her hand trembled slightly. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" And this time the words sounded different. Actually sweet, actually caring. Funny how much easier it was to care once someone else took the risk first. Lorelei looked at the menu. The prices were listed in red numbers that seemed impossibly large. Pancakes $4.95, eggs $3.50, hot chocolate $2.75. She had $23 in her jacket pocket, 2 years of birthday money and found change, and the kind of careful saving that 6-year-olds did when they knew their survival might depend on having resources. She looked up at Ghost. He was watching her, waiting. "I don't have very much money," Lorelei said. Clear, direct, no point in lying about it. Ghost didn't react, didn't tell her it was okay or that money didn't matter, or any of the meaningless reassurances adults offered when they wanted to feel generous without actually committing to anything. He just raised 2 fingers at Rita, a simple gesture. Lorelei wasn't sure what it meant, but Rita apparently did because she nodded and stood there with her pen ready. Lorelei looked at the menu again. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. She was aware of everyone in the diner watching, could feel their eyes, could hear the conversations dropping to whispers, could sense the attention shifting to this back booth and the weird tableau they were making. The biker and the crippled girl, the monster and the victim. Except she wasn't a victim, not anymore, not if she could help it. She pointed to the menu. "Pancakes, please," she said, "and scrambled eggs, and bacon, and toast, and hot chocolate, please." It was too much food. She knew it was too much food, but her stomach felt like it was trying to eat itself from the inside, and she'd learned not to be shy about taking what she needed when it was offered because offers could be withdrawn at any time without warning. Rita wrote it down, didn't comment on the quantity, didn't ask questions, just wrote and then looked at Ghost. "Same," he said, "and more coffee." Rita left. Lorelei watched her go, watched her grip the edge of the counter for just a second before picking up the order pad, watched her take a breath, watched her compose herself into the version of Rita who could deal with this, whatever this was. Lorelei turned back to Ghost. He was still watching her, patient, waiting for something though she didn't know what. The silence stretched. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just heavy, weighted with all the things that hadn't been said yet but would need to be, all the questions that were coming, all the truth that Lorelei would have to decide whether to tell. "What's your name?" Ghost asked. His voice was quiet, private, the kind of quiet that meant the conversation was just between them, not for Rita or the church women or anyone else in this diner who was pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. "Lorelei," she said. Then because she'd learned that adults didn't always remember kids' names unless you made it memorable, "Lorelei Grace Ashford. People call me Lori." He nodded once. "How old are you, Lori?" "6. I'll be 7 in December." "Where do you live?" Lorelei hesitated. This was where it got complicated, where the truth had sharp edges that could cut you if you weren't careful. "I used to live on Meadowbrook Lane," she said carefully. "I don't anymore." Something flickered in Ghost's eyes. Not surprise, something more like confirmation, like she'd just verified something he'd already suspected. "Why not?" Lorelei looked at her hands. They were folded on the table, fingers interlaced, knuckles white from squeezing too hard. She made herself relax them, made herself breathe. This was it. The moment where she either told the truth and hoped he believed her, or told a lie and stayed safe for another few hours until Vincent found her. She looked up, met Ghost's eyes, those hard riverstone eyes that had seen terrible things. "Because Vincent wants me dead," she said. The words dropped into the space between them like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward, changing everything. Ghost's expression didn't change, didn't soften into disbelief or harden into anger, or do any of the things Lorelei had seen adults do when children said things that were too big, too dark, too real to be comfortable. He just held her gaze and said, "Tell me." So she did. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out the paper she'd been carrying for 6 days. The library printout, life insurance contestability period, 2 years. She unfolded it carefully and spread it on the table between them. "Vincent took out a life insurance policy on me 22 months ago," Lorelei said. Her voice was steady, clinical, the voice of someone reciting facts that had been memorized and examined and understood from every angle. $310,000. "I found the paperwork in his desk when I was looking for my birth certificate for school." Ghost leaned forward slightly, reading the paper. His face was still neutral, but something was happening behind his eyes. Processing, calculating. "I didn't understand what it meant at first," Lorelei continued. "So I went to the library, used the computers, looked up what contestability meant. It means the insurance company can investigate if someone dies within 2 years of the policy being issued. They can refuse to pay if they find fraud or lies. But after 2 years," Ghost said, it wasn't a question. "After 2 years, they have to pay, no matter what, even if it looks suspicious, even if someone should ask questions. The window closes and the money is guaranteed." Lorelei pulled out another piece of paper. This one was more worn, folded and unfolded so many times the creases were starting to tear. It was a piece of notebook paper covered in her careful 6-year-old handwriting. Dates, times, incidents, a record. "I've been keeping notes," she said, "since I was 5. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. I just knew that I needed to remember, that someday someone might ask and I'd need to have proof." Ghost took the paper, started reading. Lorelei watched his face, watched his jaw tighten, watched a muscle jump in his cheek, watched his eyes move down the page, taking in 2 years of systematic abuse documented in a child's handwriting. September 14th. Vincent locked the refrigerator. 3 days. So hungry. October 2nd, Vincent said, "I fell downstairs." Told doctor different story than he told neighbors. Why November 8th? Hospital visit. Dr. Morrison asked about my leg. Vincent cried. Doctor believed him. December 18th. Heard Vincent on phone, talking about money. Couldn't hear all words, but he said my name. January 23rd. Vincent forgot to lock medicine cabinet. Saw bottles with my name. For pain. I don't take them. Where do they go on and on? 2 years, 23 pages. The careful documentation of a child trying to solve the mystery of her own murder. Ghost finished reading, set the paper down gently. His hands were flat on the table. Big scarred hands that were absolutely still in the way that suggested it was taking effort to keep them that way. Vincent Marlowe, Lorelei said. My stepfather. He married my mom when I was 3. She left 6 months later. I don't know where she went. Vincent said she didn't want me. Said I was too much trouble after the accident. The accident, Ghost said. His voice was careful. With your leg. It wasn't an accident, Lorelei said, and for the first time her voice wavered. Just slightly, just enough to show that underneath the clinical recitation of facts, underneath the careful documentation, and the survival calculations, she was still 6 years old and still terrified. Vincent said it was. He told the first hospital I fell down the stairs. Told the second hospital I fell off a bike. I never had a bike. I never fell. I remember what happened, but nobody asks me. Nobody wants to hear it. They just want to hear Vincent's story because his story makes sense and mine doesn't. She stopped, took a breath, found her control again. The policy has 56 days left in the contestability period, she said. After that, Vincent gets $310,000 when I die. Not if, when, because he's been planning this for 22 months. The locked refrigerator, the medication I don't take but somehow disappears, the times he forgets to heat the house in winter, the rides to school where he drops me off in the rain without an umbrella. Little things, things that could be accidents, things that could be neglect, things that add up to a 6-year-old with one leg who dies of complications and nobody questions it because didn't she always have health problems? Wasn't it always just a matter of time? Ghost was very still. I heard him on the phone, Lorelei said. 6 nights ago, he was in his bedroom, talking to a woman. I was in the hallway. He didn't know I was there because I'm good at being quiet. I've had to be. What did he say? He said 56 days. He said after Thanksgiving. He said she won't make it that long anyway, so we might as well move up the timeline. Lorelei's hands had started shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. The woman laughed. She said, make sure it looks natural. She said they'd fast-track the claim. They'd have the money in 2 weeks. Who was the woman? I don't know her name, just her voice. Beverly something. Vincent called her Beverly. She works at Big Sky Insurance. She's the one who approved my policy. Ghost's eyes were very blue, very hard. The kind of eyes that had looked at enemies and made decisions about who lived and who didn't and lived with those decisions afterward. You walked here, he said, from Meadowbrook Lane. Yes, sir. That's 17 miles. Yes, sir. In the middle of the night, by yourself, on crutches. Yes, sir. Lorelei's voice was getting smaller. She hated that. Hated the way trauma made her shrink. But she couldn't help it. I left Saturday night around 11. Vincent was drunk, passed out in the living room. I took $23 from the cookie jar. That's all the money I have. I wrote a note. I said I was sorry. I don't know why I said that. I'm not sorry, but it seemed like the thing to write. She stopped, realized she was talking too fast, giving too many details, the way she did when she was nervous, when she needed people to believe her and knew that belief was always conditional, always revocable. The food arrived, Rita bringing plates and setting them down with a gentleness that suggested she'd heard at least some of what had been said and was trying very hard not to cry in front of the customers. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, hot chocolate with whipped cream that was already melting into white swirls. Lorelei looked at it, smelled it, felt her stomach clench with a hunger that was beyond appetite, beyond desire, into the territory of biological desperation. But she didn't move, didn't reach for the fork, didn't start eating, because she'd learned that food could be taken away, that offers could be rescinded, That nothing was certain until it was actually in your stomach, and even then you had to be careful because making yourself sick from eating too fast just meant the food got wasted. Ghost picked up his own fork, cut into his omelet, took a bite, chewed, swallowed, set the fork down and looked at Lorelei. Eat, he said. Permission, authorization, the thing she'd been waiting for without realizing it. Lorelei picked up her fork, cut a piece of pancake, put it in her mouth. The sweetness hit her tongue, and for a second she thought she might cry. Might actually break down right there in the booth and sob, because pancakes shouldn't make you want to cry. But when you've been hungry long enough, when you've been scared long enough, when you've been alone long enough, even small mercies feel enormous. She chewed, swallowed, took another bite, and another, faster now. Control slipping. The careful facade she'd been maintaining since she walked into this diner cracking around the edges. She ate like someone who didn't trust that the food would still be there in 5 minutes. Like someone who'd learned that you take what you can get while you can get it because the world was unreliable and people were worse. Ghost didn't watch her eat, didn't stare, just drank his coffee and looked out the window at the mountains and gave her the privacy to fall apart quietly over scrambled eggs and bacon. Rita came back, refilled coffee, looked at Lorelei with eyes that were definitely wet now, said nothing, left the check face down on the table and walked away. Lorelei ate until her stomach hurt, ate until she physically couldn't take another bite, ate through the pancakes and eggs and bacon and toast and drank the hot chocolate so fast she got brain freeze that made her eyes water. Then she stopped, set her fork down, folded her hands in her lap, breathed. When did you eat last? Ghost asked. Lorelei had to think about it. The days had blurred. Survival time moved differently than normal time. Hours stretched. Days compressed. A week could feel like a month, could feel like a year, could feel like forever. Tuesday, she said finally. Breakfast. Vincent made oatmeal. He was in a good mood. I ate as much as I could because I didn't know when he'd let me eat again. Today was Sunday. 5 days. A 6-year-old girl had gone 5 days without food. Ghost's face did something complicated. Not pity. Something harder than that. Something that looked a lot like rage wrapped in a control that was barely holding. He pulled out his phone. Old model, flip phone. The kind of phone that made calls and texts and nothing else. His fingers moved over the keys. 3 words. That was all. Church. Now. Rosie's. He set the phone on the table, looked at Lorelei. I'm going to help you, he said, but I need you to understand something first. Lorelei waited. This gets complicated from here, Ghost said. Vincent's your legal guardian, which means the law is on his side until we prove otherwise, which means people are going to ask questions. Courts, lawyers, social workers, police. They're all going to want to hear your story, and you're going to have to tell it over and over to strangers, to people who might not believe you, to people who are going to want to send you back to Vincent because that's what the system does. It sends kids back, even when it shouldn't. Lorelei nodded. She'd expected this. Had researched it, actually. Had read about custody and guardianship and the rights of parents versus the rights of children, which basically didn't exist. I need to know, Ghost said, if you're ready for that, if you're strong enough for that, because once we start this, we can't stop. We're all the way in. You understand? Lorelei looked at him, at this stranger who'd said yes when everyone else said no, at this dangerous man with the scarred face and the biker vest who was offering to fight a system that ate children for breakfast. I walked 17 miles in the middle of the night on one leg, Lorelei said, in 28-degree weather, with crutches that are held together with electrical tape. I documented 2 years of abuse in notebooks I hid under my mattress. I researched insurance law at the public library when I was supposed to be doing reading homework. I figured out that my stepfather was planning to kill me, and I made a plan to escape, and I executed that plan alone because there was nobody to help me. She leaned forward slightly. I'm 6 years old and I've been strong enough my whole life, she said. The question isn't whether I'm ready. The question is whether you are. Ghost looked at her for a long moment. Then something happened to his face that Lorelei had never seen before in an adult. Not a smile, not quite. More like recognition. The look of someone seeing something they didn't expect but respected anyway. Yeah, he said, I'm ready. The door to the diner opened. Cold air rushed in. Lorelei tensed automatically. Preparation to run, to hide, to do whatever it took to survive the next 5 seconds. But it wasn't Vincent. It was a man. Huge. 6'5", maybe 290 pounds, most of it muscle, gone slightly soft with age. Late 50s, beard going gray, leather vest identical to Ghost's, Hell's Angels rocker, Montana bottom rocker, patches that told stories Lorelei couldn't read but could feel. He saw Ghost in the back booth, started walking that direction. His eyes found Lorelei, registered her, didn't react. Just kept walking with the kind of purpose that suggested he'd been summoned and he came and that was all that needed to be said. He slid into the booth next to Ghost. The whole thing groaned under his weight. He looked at Lorelei. She looked back. This is Tiny, Ghost said. He's with me. Tiny nodded at Lorelei, a small gesture, respectful, the kind of acknowledgement you gave to equals, not children. Ma'am, he said. Lorelei blinked. Nobody had ever called her ma'am before. Hi, she said. Tiny's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Ghost leaned toward Tiny. Quiet conversation, low voices. Lorelei couldn't hear all of it, but she caught pieces. Vincent, insurance, 56 days. Beverly, big sky, police, lawyers. Tiny listened. His face didn't change, but his hands on the table slowly formed into fists. Not threatening, just automatic. The physical manifestation of anger that had nowhere to go yet. When Ghost finished, Tiny looked at Lorelei again. You got any other family? He asked. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone? Lorelei shook her head. My mom's parents died before I was born. Dad was never in the picture. Vincent's family is in California, and I met them once. They didn't like me. Friends. I'm 6. I go to school. I come home. Vincent doesn't let me have play dates. Teachers you trust. Lorelei thought about that. Mrs. Patterson at the library. Principal Morrison at school, who had asked once about the bruises and accepted Vincent's explanation without pushing. Her second-grade teacher, Miss Chen, who seemed nice but also seemed overwhelmed and unlikely to go to war for one student. No, Lorelei said, not really. Tiny nodded, looked at Ghost. We're it then. Yeah. Maggie already called. She's on her way. This is going to get messy. I know. Could get legal. I know. Could get expensive. Ghost just looked at him. Tiny sighed. Yeah, okay, I'm in. The door opened again. More people coming in. Lorelei counted them automatically. 3. All wearing the same leather vests. All heading toward the back booth like they'd been called. Within 10 minutes, there were 8 of them. 8 large, dangerous-looking men surrounding one small 6-year-old girl in a booth at the back of a diner in Montana on a Sunday morning. The rest of the diner had gone very quiet. Rita came by, looked at the assembled bikers, looked at Lorelei, made a decision. Anyone gives you trouble, she said to Ghost, you let me know. Appreciate it, Ghost said. Rita left. Lorelei watched her go to the counter, watched her pick up the phone, watched her make a call that was probably to the owner or the police or someone who needed to know that something unusual was happening at Rosie's and they should probably pay attention. Lorelei looked around the booth. 8 men, 8 members of an outlaw motorcycle club. 8 people who society said were dangerous, were criminals, were the kind of people you crossed the street to avoid. 8 people who had shown up without question when one of their own said help. More than 38 respectable citizens had said no. 8 outlaws said yes. Lorelei was starting to understand something about the world, about how the people you were supposed to trust were often the ones who failed you, and how the people you were supposed to fear were sometimes the only ones who showed up. Lori, Ghost said. She looked at him. Do you trust me? It was the question she'd been asking herself since she walked to this booth, since she asked if she could sit down, since the stranger with the scarred face said yes. Did she trust him? Trust was expensive. Trust was dangerous. Trust was the thing that got you hurt when you gave it to the wrong person. But sitting here in this booth surrounded by 8 bikers who had dropped everything to help a child they didn't know, Lorelei realized something. She was already hurt, had been hurt for 2 years, had been alone and afraid and fighting for survival every single day. What did she have to lose by trusting one more time? Yes, she said, I trust you. Ghost nodded once. Then he did something unexpected. He reached across the table, held out his hand, palm up, not reaching for her, not grabbing, just offering. Lorelei looked at his hand, scarred, weathered. The hand of someone who'd lived a life that was hard and fought for things that mattered. She put her small hand in his fingers closed around hers, gentle, careful, the grip of someone who knew his own strength and chose not to use all of it. Okay then, Ghost said, we're going to fix this. Outside the diner in the parking lot, Vincent Marlowe pulled into an empty space and sat in his car staring at the building. He'd been driving for 3 hours, checking every road, every diner, every place a 6-year-old girl with one leg might end up. He'd found her. He could see her through the window. Back booth, sitting with someone. Couldn't tell who. Vincent smiled, put the car in park, adjusted his coat, put on the face he wore for public consumption. The worried father, the dedicated guardian, the man doing his best with a troubled child who didn't make it easy. He got out of the car, started walking toward the diner entrance, practicing his lines, his tone, his tears. He didn't know yet that he was already too late, that the moment Lorelei Grace Ashford sat down in that booth and Ghost said yes, everything had changed. He didn't know that the most dangerous man in Clearwater County had just decided quietly and completely and without drama or announcement that Vincent Marlowe was never going to touch his child again. He didn't know that 38 people had said no, but 8 had said yes, and 8 was enough. He reached for the door handle. Inside, Lorelei squeezed Ghost's hand and whispered, he's here. Ghost's eyes went to the door, saw Vincent through the glass, tall, clean cut, expensive coat, the picture of respectability. Ghost squeezed Lorelei's hand back. I know, he said. Let him come. The door opened, the bell above it rang, and Vincent Marlowe walked into a room that had already decided he was the monster and was just waiting for him to prove it. The last booth, part 2, Vincent Marlowe had practiced this entrance 1,000 times. In mirrors, in his car, in the shower where the water drowned out the sound of his own voice, rehearsing concern, manufacturing grief, perfecting the tremor that would make people believe he was a father on the edge of breaking. He was very good at this. He convinced emergency room doctors that Lorelei had fallen downstairs when the x-rays showed impact patterns consistent with being pushed. He'd convinced social workers that a 4-year-old's amputation was a tragic accident. When the surgical reports raised questions the surgeons were too polite to ask out loud. He'd convinced neighbors and teachers and insurance adjusters and every single person who might have stopped him that he was a devoted guardian doing his best with a difficult, troubled child. One more performance, one more room full of strangers to convince. Then he'd take Lorelei home and finish what he'd started 22 months ago when he signed those insurance papers with hands that didn't shake, because hands only shake when you feel guilt, and Vincent Marlowe had long ago evolved past such inefficient emotions. The diner was exactly what he'd expected. Small-town Montana. Blue-collar Sunday morning crowd. People who worked with their hands and believed in God and trusted authority figures who wore the right clothes and said the right things. Easy. His eyes found Lorelei immediately. Back booth, of course. Children always gravitated toward corners when they were scared. Animal instinct, back to the wall, watch the room, prepare to run even though running was pointless. She was sitting with someone, a man, large, older, leather vest with patches Vincent recognized because he'd done his research when he moved to Montana. Hell's Angels, Outlaw Motorcycle Club, the kind of organization that respectable people cross the street to avoid. Perfect. This actually made things easier. The narrative wrote itself. Troubled child runs away, falls in with dangerous criminals. Concerned father rescues her from a situation she doesn't understand. Everyone sympathizes. Everyone helps. Everyone sends the poor girl home where she belongs. Vincent composed his face, let his shoulders slump slightly, let his eyes go and wet. Let relief and fear and desperate parental love flood his expression in exactly the right proportions. He started across the diner. People looked up, saw him, saw the expensive coat and the respectable haircut and the face of a man who looked like he belonged in church on Sunday morning, who looked like he volunteered at food banks and donated to charity and would never ever hurt a child. Vincent could feel their sympathy, could sense them making the calculation. Clean-cut man versus scary biker. Worried father versus outlaw criminal. This was going to be easy. He reached the booth. Lorelei, his voice cracked on her name. Perfect, just the right amount of emotion, relief threaded with reproach. Oh, thank God, baby. I've been looking everywhere for you. He reached for her. The man in the booth didn't move, didn't stand up or get out of the way, or do any of the things that normal people did when a parent was reuniting with their child. He just sat there, blocking access, a wall of leather and muscle and absolute stillness. Vincent stopped, recalibrated, shifted his attention to the man. Sir, I can't thank you enough for keeping her safe. Gratitude, warmth, the tone of one reasonable man talking to another. My daughter, she has episodes. She wanders sometimes, gets confused. I've been worried sick. The man looked at Vincent, said nothing. Those eyes, blue-gray and cold as river stones, just stared without blinking, without reacting, without giving Vincent anything to work with. Vincent felt the first small flutter of concern. This wasn't playing out the way it should. The biker should be relieved, should be happy to hand over a problem that wasn't his, should be eager to get back to his breakfast and forget this ever happened. Instead, he just sat there. Watching Vincent like Vincent was something that needed watching. Lorelei, honey. Vincent shifted his attention back to his stepdaughter. Used the voice he used when he needed her to cooperate, gentle but with steel underneath. A voice that said, comply, or there will be consequences. You've caused a lot of trouble. We need to go home now. Lorelei didn't move, didn't look at him, just sat there with her hands folded on the table in front of her, staring at the empty plate where her breakfast had been. Smart girl. She knew better than to argue in public, knew better than to make a scene that would embarrass him, knew better than to know. Her voice was quiet but clear, audible to the whole booth, probably audible to the tables nearby. I'm not going. Vincent's smile froze. The people at the neighboring tables were definitely listening now. He could feel their attention shifting, could feel the narrative starting to slip. He forced a laugh, indulgent, patient, the laugh of a father dealing with a difficult child in front of strangers. Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but my name is Lori. She still wasn't looking at him. And you're lying. The diner got quieter, conversations dropping off, forks pausing halfway to mouths. Everyone watching now, everyone listening. Vincent's jaw tightened. He covered it with another patient smile. Honey, you're tired and confused. I'm not confused. Finally, she looked at him, those blue eyes that were too old for her face, eyes that had seen too much, eyes that made Vincent uncomfortable in a way he didn't like to acknowledge because discomfort was weakness and weakness was failure. You told Dr. Morrison I fell off a bike. I never had a bike. The diner was completely silent now. Vincent felt control starting to slip through his fingers like water. This was not the script. This was not how this was supposed to go. Lorelai was supposed to be compliant, scared, eager to avoid a scene. She was supposed to come home quietly and then he could deal with her disobedience in private where there were no witnesses and no consequences. But she wasn't being compliant. She was being defiant, in public, in front of dozens of people, saying things that could raise questions. Questions that could lead to investigations. Investigations that could find the insurance policy and the timeline and the pattern. He needed to regain control. Sir, Vincent said, turning back to the man in the booth. Shifting tactics, adult to adult, man to man. I appreciate you feeding her. Really, but this is a family matter. My daughter has some emotional issues. She makes things up sometimes. Her therapist says it's a trauma response from the accident. Sit down. The biker's voice was quiet, not loud, not aggressive, just two words spoken with absolute certainty that they would be obeyed. Vincent blinked. Excuse me? I said, sit down. It wasn't a request. Vincent looked around the diner. The other customers were watching. The waitress was watching. Three more men in identical leather vests had appeared and were standing near the door. When had they arrived? How had Vincent not noticed the narrative was collapsing? The room that should have been sympathetic to the concerned father was instead watching him like he was the problem, like he was the threat. Vincent sat, slid into the booth across from Lorelai, as far from her as a seat allowed because even now, even in crisis, he maintained his discipline. No physical contact in public, nothing that could be witnessed, nothing that could be used against him later. I don't know what she's told you, Vincent started. Reasonable tone, explanations mode. But Lorelai has a history of, she's been without food for 5 days. The biker's voice cut across Vincent's practiced speech like a blade. Walked 17 miles in the middle of the night, in 28-degree weather, on one leg. That's not a troubled child having an episode. That's a child running for her life. Vincent's mouth closed, his mind raced. Damage control, spin. Find the angle that made this make sense. I locked the refrigerator, he said. Let his voice break slightly. Let shame color his tone. I know how it sounds, but she has impulse control issues. She'll eat until she makes herself sick. Her doctor recommended portion control. I was trying to help. I was trying to protect her from herself. He looked at Lorelai, let his eyes go soft, let guilt flood his expression. Baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like you couldn't eat. I was just worried about you. You know how you get stomach aches when you eat too much. I was trying to help. Lorelai looked at him with those old, knowing eyes. You locked the refrigerator for 3 days, she said. Not because of portion control, because you wanted to see how long I could last without food. You were building a medical history, malnutrition, weakness. So when I die, it looks expected. The booth went very still. Vincent felt something cold move through his chest. She knew. She'd figured it out. 6 years old, and she'd put together the pieces that should have been invisible to a child. The policy, the timeline, the pattern. She knew, which meant he needed to discredit her immediately before anyone believed her. Sweetheart, that's your imagination again. Gentle, concerned. The voice of a father worried about his child's mental health. We've talked about this, the stories you tell yourself, the things you think are happening that aren't real. Your therapist said, I don't have a therapist, Lorelai said. You tell people I do, but I don't. You never take me. You just say you do so people think you're getting me help. Vincent's hands were flat on the table. He was aware of them, aware that they wanted to clench into fists, aware that body language mattered, that every gesture was being observed, cataloged, judged. He kept them flat, relaxed, the hands of a man who had nothing to hide. Sir, Vincent said to the biker. His voice was getting harder now, less patient father and more authority figure. I think I'd like to know who's been filling my daughter's head with these ideas. Who you are, what your interest is in this situation. The biker looked at him with those cold eyes. Doesn't matter who I am, he said. What matters is that policy you took out. The one worth $310,000. The one with 8 weeks left on the contestability period. Vincent's blood went cold. How did he know about the policy? How could he possibly know about the policy? Vincent had been so careful, had used a regional carrier that didn't share information, had listed himself as sole beneficiary, had made sure no one knew except Beverly. Beverly Hutchinson at Big Sky Insurance, his partner in this, his collaborator, the woman who'd approved the policy and promised to fast-track the claim and split the money 50-50. Had she talked? Had she told someone? Had she gotten nervous? And no, Beverly wouldn't talk. She had too much to lose. She was in this as deep as he was, which meant someone had gone looking, had investigated, had found records that should have been private, which meant this was bigger than he'd thought, more organized, more dangerous. Vincent's mind raced through options. Denial was no longer viable. Too much information was already out there. Aggression would look guilty. Retreat would look suspicious. He needed to change the frame. Make this about something else. Make himself the victim. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Vincent said. His voice was cold now, the mask dropping. But accusing me of planning to murder my own daughter based on a legal insurance policy that any responsible parent would have. Two hospitals, the biker interrupted. Two different stories about how she lost her leg. You want to try a third version? See if it sticks better than the first two. Vincent's jaw clenched. Children misremember traumatic events, he said. Steady voice, clinical, the tone of someone explaining simple facts to simple people. The doctors all agreed that her recollection was confused. That's normal for someone her age experiencing significant trauma. She was 4, the biker said, and she remembers just fine. Remembers you told the first ER she fell downstairs. Told the second hospital she fell off a bike she never owned. Remembers a doctor with glasses who looked at your hand squeezing her wrist and wrote something down and walked away. Vincent felt sweat starting on his palms, kept his hands flat, kept his expression neutral. If you're going to accuse me of something, he said quietly, then make the accusation. Otherwise, I'm taking my daughter home. She's not going anywhere. The words hung in the air like a physical barrier. Vincent looked around the booth, the biker in front of him, 3 more standing near the door, others appearing at the edges of his vision. Large men, dangerous men, men who'd made a decision about him and wouldn't be talked out of it. The room that should have been sympathetic to the concerned father had become something else, had become a courtroom, a jury, an execution chamber. He was losing. Vincent stood up, slowly, carefully, hands visible, non-threatening. This is harassment, he said, clear voice, loud enough for the room to hear, loud enough for the witnesses to remember. I'm calling the sheriff. I'm reporting that my daughter is being held against her will by members of a known criminal organization, and I'm going to make sure every one of you pays for this. The biker stood as well, not fast, not aggressive, just unfolding from the booth with the kind of certainty that came from never having lost a physical confrontation and not expecting to start now. Good idea, he said. Call the sheriff. Use my phone if you want. He pulled an old flip phone from his pocket, set it on the table between them. I'll wait. Vincent stared at the phone. This was a trap, had to be a trap. They wanted him to call, wanted him to involve law enforcement, which meant they had something, some evidence, some witness, something that would make the sheriff side with them instead of him. Beverly. It had to be Beverly. She'd flipped. She'd gotten scared and talked, and now they had her testimony in the policy documents and probably recordings of their phone calls, because Vincent had been stupid, had been careless, had trusted someone who was ultimately more interested in saving herself than protecting their plan. He looked at Lorelei. She was watching him with those 2 old eyes, seeing everything, understanding everything. A 6-year-old child who'd somehow managed to outmaneuver him. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. just for a second, just long enough for everyone in the booth to see it, to understand what those fists wanted to do, to understand what kind of man Vincent Marlowe really was when the mask slipped. He unclenched them, forced them flat, forced his expression neutral. "I'll be back," he said, quiet, controlled, with the authorities, and when I am, I expect her to be ready to come home. He turned and walked toward the door. The three bikers near the entrance didn't move, didn't get out of his way, just stood there watching him approach with flat expressions that promised violence if he tried to force his way through. Vincent stopped, looked at them, looked back at the booth where Lorelei sat with the man who'd somehow managed to destroy 2 years of careful planning in less than an hour. "This isn't over," Vincent said. "Yes, it is," the biker replied. "You just don't know it yet." Vincent walked out. The door closed behind him with a bell chime that sounded like a funeral toll. Inside the booth, Lorelei let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her whole body was shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer, overwhelming reality of what had just happened. She'd stood up to Vincent, in public, in front of witnesses, had said the things she'd been too scared to say for 2 years, had told the truth, and someone had believed her. Someone had believed her. Ghost sat back down, looked at Lorelei. His expression was careful, controlled, but something was happening behind those riverstone eyes, something that looked like rage wrapped in discipline. "You okay?" he asked. Lorelei nodded, didn't trust her voice yet. "He's going to come back," Ghost said. Not a question, statement of fact. "I know. Probably with the sheriff, probably with a story about concerned father and troubled child and bikers who don't understand family matters." "Yes." Ghost nodded slowly, pulled his phone back, made a call. "Maggie," he said when someone answered, "I need you, now. Rosie's Diner on Route 12. Bring your recorder and your law books and whatever you need to file an emergency protective order on a Sunday." Pause, listening. 6-year-old girl, life insurance policy, systematic starvation, probably attempted murder. Another pause. "Yeah, it's that bad." He ended the call, looked at Tiny, who'd been sitting silent through the whole confrontation with Vincent. "He's going for the sheriff," Ghost said. "Probably," Tiny agreed. "Question is whether the sheriff believes him or us. Depends on who gets there first." Tiny pulled out his own phone, started texting, fast thumbs on a keyboard too small for hands that large. Ghost looked at Lorelei. "I need you to tell me everything," he said. "Right now, before anyone else gets here. Everything Vincent did, everything you saw, everything you heard, all of it. No detail is too small, no memory is too insignificant. You understand?" Lorelei understood. This was the investigation. This was where she stopped being a scared child and became a witness, a source, evidence. She pulled the notebook from her jacket, the worn pages covered in her careful handwriting. 2 years of documentation, 2 years of notes and dates and incidents that she'd recorded without fully understanding why, except that some instinct told her she'd need them someday. Today was someday. She handed the notebook to Ghost, watched him open it, watched his face as he read. His jaw got tighter with each page, the muscle in his cheek jumped. His knuckles went white where they gripped the notebook. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. Just slightly, just enough that Lorelei could see the effort it was taking to keep them still. "How long have you been keeping this?" Ghost asked. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. "Since I was 5, after the first hospital visit, after I realized nobody was asking me what happened, just asking Vincent. I thought if I wrote it down, if I kept track, then someday someone would ask me. Someone would want to know the truth instead of just Vincent's version." Ghost closed the notebook, set it on the table between them like it was something precious, something sacred. "You're 6 years old," he said, "and you documented your own abuse case, built your own evidence file, did the work that trained investigators are supposed to do." Lorelei didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know if it was praise or observation or just shock that she'd had to do this at all. I didn't want to die, she said simply, and I knew Vincent was planning something. I just didn't know what until I found the insurance papers. The door opened. A woman walked in, late 60s, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, power suit in dark blue, leather briefcase in one hand, the kind of woman who walked into rooms and commanded attention without raising her voice. She saw a ghost in the back booth, started walking that direction with the kind of purpose that suggested she'd been doing this for decades and wasn't impressed by diners or bikers or Sunday morning emergencies. She reached the booth, looked at Lorelei. Something shifted in her expression, softened slightly around the edges. "You must be Lori," she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, but not unkind. "My name is Margaret Brennan. I'm a lawyer. Ghost called me because you need help. Is that correct?" Lorelei looked at Ghost. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am," Lorelei said. "Good. I'm going to ask you some questions. They might be difficult. They might be personal, but I need you to answer them honestly and completely because I can't help you if I don't understand what's happening. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." Margaret sat down next to Lorelei, opened her briefcase, pulled out a digital recorder, set it on the table. "This is being recorded," she said, "for your protection and mine. Everything you say is confidential. Everything you tell me is privileged. That means I can't share it with anyone unless you give me permission or unless a court orders me to. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Margaret pressed record. Sunday, November 3rd, 11:47 a.m. An interview with Lorelei Grace Ashford, age 6, also present, Jackson Reeves and Theodore Bale. "Lori, can you state your full name for the record?" "Lorelei Grace Ashford." "And how old are you?" "6. I'll be 7 on December 19th. "Where do you live?" "I used to live at 247 Meadowbrook Lane with my stepfather, Vincent Marlowe. I don't live there anymore." "Why not?" Lorelei took a breath. This was it. The official statement, the legal record, the thing that would either save her or condemn her depending on whether anyone believed her. "Because Vincent is planning to kill me for the insurance money," she said. Clear voice, steady, the voice of someone who'd practiced saying this in the dark of her room when no one was listening. "He took out a life insurance policy on me 22 months ago, $310,000. The contestability period ends in 8 weeks. After that, if I die, he gets the money and the insurance company can't investigate. He's been starving me and creating medical records that make it look like I have health problems, so when I die, it seems expected. Natural causes, complications from my amputation. Nobody questions it." Margaret's pen moved across her legal pad, fast, efficient, capturing every word. "How do you know about the insurance policy?" "I found the paperwork in Vincent's desk. I didn't understand what it meant, so I went to the library, used the computers, researched life insurance and contestability periods, figured out what he was planning." "When did you find the paperwork?" 6 days ago, November 27th. Margaret's pen paused. 6 days ago, not months ago, not years ago. "No, ma'am, 6 days ago. And in those 6 days, you researched insurance law, documented your findings, formulated an escape plan, and executed that plan alone." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret set her pen down, looked at Lorelei with an expression that was complicated, professional assessment mixed with something that might have been respect. "Tell me about your leg," Margaret said. "How did you lose it?" This was the hard part. The part Lorelei had avoided thinking about for 2 years because thinking about it meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking down, and breaking down meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. But Margaret was asking, and Ghost was listening, and this was the moment where the truth either saved her or didn't. "I was 4, Lorelei said. Her voice was smaller now, younger, the voice of the child she'd been when it happened. "Vincent was angry. I don't remember why. He was always angry about something. I was in my room. He came in, started yelling. I tried to leave, tried to get past him to the door. He grabbed me, pushed me. I fell. She stopped, breathed. There were stairs from my bedroom to the first floor. 13 stairs. I know because I counted them after. In the hospital, counted everything because counting meant not thinking about what happened. Did you fall down the stairs? Margaret's voice was gentle but insistent. No, Vincent threw me. Down the stairs. I remember falling. Remember hitting the steps. Remember my leg getting caught on something. The railing maybe. Or the banister. Something. And then pain. So much pain. And Vincent running down after me saying, oh God, what did you do? What did you do? Like it was my fault. Like I'd thrown myself down the stairs. Tears were running down Lorelei's face now. She didn't wipe them, didn't acknowledge them, just kept talking. The hospital asked what happened. Vincent said I fell, said I was playing on the stairs and slipped, said he told me 100 times not to play there, but I didn't listen. The doctor looked at the injury, looked at Vincent, looked at me. He had glasses, young guy. He asked me what happened. I started to tell him, and Vincent squeezed my hand. Hard. Not enough that the doctor would notice, but enough that I felt it. Enough that I understood. The wrong answer would hurt. The wrong answer would make things worse. What did you tell the doctor? I said I fell, said I was playing and fell, said it was my fault. What did the doctor do? He wrote something down, looked at Vincent's hand holding mine, looked at my face. I thought he knew. I thought he understood. But he just wrote something down and left. And Vincent smiled at me, said, good girl, said I was learning. Margaret was very still. The first hospital couldn't save your legs, she said. No, too much damage. Crushed bone, nerve damage, infection risk. They said amputation was necessary to save my life. Vincent signed the papers, cried in front of the nurses. Everyone felt so bad for him. The single father dealing with a terrible accident. Nobody suspected. Nobody asked questions. In the second hospital, 6 months later, follow-up appointment, different doctor. She asked about the accident. Vincent said I fell off my bike, said I'd been riding without a helmet despite his warnings, said kids don't listen. The doctor looked confused, checked the files, said the previous hospital said stairs. Vincent laughed, said, oh, there had been 2 accidents. First the stairs, later the bike. But it was the bike that did the real damage. The doctor accepted it. Why wouldn't she? Vincent looked honest, sounded honest, was honest except for the part where everything was a lie. Margaret pressed stop on the recorder, set it down, looked at Lorelei for a long moment. I've been practicing family law for 41 years, Margaret said quietly. I've seen abuse cases. I've seen neglect cases. I've seen parents do terrible things to their children for reasons I'll never understand. But I have never in 4 decades seen a 6-year-old child with the presence of mind to document her own case file research, the legal framework of her stepfather's murder plot, and execute an escape plan with the kind of strategic thinking that most adults couldn't manage. She reached across the table, put her hand on Lorelei's. I believe you, Margaret said. I believe every word, and I'm going to make sure that Vincent Marlowe never gets anywhere near you again. Lorelei felt something break loose in her chest, something that had been wound tight for 2 years. Not relief exactly. Relief was too small a word. This was bigger. This was the weight of carrying the truth alone suddenly shared with someone else. Someone who believed her. Someone who could help. What happens now? Lorelei asked. Now we file an emergency protective order, Margaret said. She was already pulling papers from her briefcase. I'm going to call Judge Patterson. He owes me a favor, a big one. I'm calling it in today. We're going to get you legal protection before Vincent comes back with the sheriff. Can you do that on a Sunday? I can do that on Christmas Day if I need to. The question is whether we can do it fast enough. Margaret pulled out her phone, started dialing. Tiny was already on his own phone doing the same. Ghost sat quiet and still watching Lorelei with those steady eyes. You did good, he said quietly, just to her. Walking out, finding help, standing up to him in front of witnesses. You did everything right. I was scared, Lorelei admitted. Brave people are always scared. That's what makes it brave. The door opened again. A man in uniform this time. Sheriff's deputy. Young, maybe 25. Uncomfortable expression on his face like he'd been called to something he didn't fully understand. Behind him, Vincent. Vincent's face was composed, calm, the mask back in place. He'd had 20 minutes in the parking lot to rebuild his persona, to prepare his story, to become the concerned father again instead of the man whose fists had clenched at a 6-year-old child. That's her, Vincent said to the deputy, pointing at Lorelei. My daughter, these people have been holding her here against her will. The deputy looked uncomfortable. He approached the booth slowly, his hand resting near his belt, but not on his weapon. Not yet. Sir, he said to Ghost, I'm Deputy Ron Walsh. I need you to step out of the booth, please. Ghost didn't move. Deputy, Margaret said, her voice cut across the tension like a knife. Margaret Brennan, attorney at law. Before you do anything, I need you to call your department and verify that I've filed an emergency protective order for this child with Judge Patterson's office. It was filed 17 minutes ago and should be in your system by now. Deputy Walsh blinked. Ma'am, I call your department, Margaret repeated. Verify the protective order, then we'll discuss what happens next. Vincent stepped forward. Officer, this is ridiculous. That's my daughter. She's 6 years old. She can't file legal motions. These people have clearly manipulated Mr. Marlowe. Margaret's voice was ice. I suggest you stop talking. Right now, anything you say can and will be used against you in the custody hearing that's going to happen Wednesday morning, whether you like it or not. Vincent's mouth snapped shut. Deputy Walsh pulled out his radio, spoke quietly into it, waited. His expression changed as he listened to the response. Surprise, confusion, then something that looked like understanding. He turned to Vincent. Mr. Marlowe, he said carefully, I'm going to need you to come with me to the station, just to answer some questions. Questions about what I'm the victim here, my daughter. Sir, Walsh's voice was firmer now. There's an active protective order. The child stays here until family services arrives. You need to come with me. This is insane. This is, sir, now. Vincent looked at Lorelei, really looked at her. And for just a second, just a fraction of a moment, the mask dropped completely. What showed underneath was cold and calculating and absolutely devoid of anything resembling love or care or human warmth. Then it was gone. The mask back. The concerned father returning. I'll be back, Vincent said. Quiet, controlled. With my lawyer, and we'll sort this out properly. He walked out with Deputy Walsh. The door closed behind them. The diner erupted in whispered conversation. Everyone who'd been watching, everyone who'd been listening, everyone who'd witnessed the confrontation now processing what they'd seen. Lorelei sat in the booth and felt the adrenaline draining out of her body, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She was so tired. Tired from the walk, tired from the fear, tired from 2 years of fighting to survive every single day. Ghost's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Carolyn Westfield just called Maggie, he said. Vincent's girlfriend. She's got recordings. Margaret looked up sharp. Recordings of what? Vincent. On the phone, 19 of them. 3 weeks worth. She started recording because something felt wrong. Kept recording because she wanted proof before she did anything. One of the recordings has Vincent talking to someone named Beverly, planning timeline, discussing how to make it look natural. Beverly Hutchinson, Lorelei said. Everyone turned to look at her. That's her full name. She works at Big Sky Insurance. She's the one who approved my policy. She and Vincent are partners, splitting the money 50-50. Margaret stared at Lorelei. How do you know that? I heard them on the phone 6 nights ago. Vincent thought I was asleep. I wasn't. I was in the hallway, listening, learning, because information is survival and I needed to know what I was up against. Margaret looked at Ghost. Ghost looked at Margaret. Some silent communication passing between them. This just became a federal case, Margaret said quietly. Insurance fraud across state lines. Conspiracy to commit murder. The FBI is going to want this. Good, Ghost said. Let them have it. Let them tear Vincent apart. Let them find every dirty secret, every lie, every plan. He looked at Lorelei. You're safe, he said. You understand Vincent can't touch you. Not legally, not physically, not anymore. Lorelei wanted to believe him, wanted to feel safe, but safety was a concept she'd forgotten how to recognize. Safety was something other children had, not her, not for 2 years. But sitting here in this booth surrounded by people who believed her, who fought for her, who showed up when no one else did, she thought maybe she could remember what safety felt like. Maybe. The emergency foster placement happened faster than Lorelai expected. By 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon, she was sitting in the passenger seat of Margaret Brennan's silver Lexus, watching the mountains roll past through a window that didn't rattle in a car that smelled like leather and lavender instead of stale beer and cigarettes. Her crutches were in the back seat. Her notebook was in her jacket pocket. Everything she owned in the world fit in the pockets of a coat 2 sizes too small. Margaret drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Not uncomfortable silence. Just the quiet of someone who understood that sometimes words were unnecessary, that sometimes a 6-year-old who just dismantled her stepfather's murder plot in front of a diner full of witnesses needed space to process what had happened. Where are we going? Lorelei asked eventually. Carol Westfield's house, Margaret said. She's fostered children before, been doing it for 11 years. Good woman, kind, trustworthy. You'll be safe there while we sort out the legal proceedings. How long will that take? The protective order hearing is Wednesday morning. 3 days. Judge Patterson will review the evidence. Vincent's lawyer will try to argue for access. We'll present your testimony, the recordings, the insurance documents, everything. Then the judge makes a decision. And if he decides Vincent gets me back, Margaret's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Just slightly, just enough that Lorelei noticed. That's not going to happen, Margaret said. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I've been doing this for 41 years. I don't lose cases where the evidence is this clear and the stakes are this high. Vincent Marlowe is going to spend a very long time in a very small room thinking about what he did, and you're never going back to Meadowbrook Lane. Lorelei wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the system worked, that justice existed, that adults who promised things actually kept those promises. But she'd spent 2 years learning that adults lied, that systems failed, that justice was something that happened to other people in stories, not to 6-year-old girls with one leg and notebooks full of evidence that nobody wanted to read. Ghost said he'd come back, Lorelei said. Tomorrow, he promised. Margaret glanced at her. Something soft moved through her expression. Jackson keeps his promises, she said. He's a lot of things, not all of them legal, not all of them wise, but he keeps his promises. If he said he'd come back, he'll come back. They pulled into a driveway. Small house, 1 story. White paint that needed touching up. Garden in front with late-season flowers still clinging to life despite the cold. A porch with a swing, windows with curtains that looked handmade. The door opened before they got out of the car. A woman emerged, early 50s, soft around the middle in the way that suggested she enjoyed cooking and didn't apologize for it. Brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Kind eyes that crinkled at the corners like she smiled often. Carol Westfield. She waited on the porch while Margaret helped Lorelei out of the car. Didn't rush forward. Didn't overwhelm with enthusiasm. Just stood there with patient stillness that suggested she understood what it was like to be a scared child, arriving at a strange house and needing space to adjust. Lorelei made her way up the porch steps. Step, swing, step, swing. The familiar rhythm, the soundtrack of her life. Carol watched her approach, made eye contact. smiled gently. You must be Lori, she said. Margaret called ahead, told me you were coming. I made up the guest room. It's small, but it's warm and the bed's comfortable. You hungry? Lorelei had eaten 4 hours ago. A full breakfast that still sat heavy in her stomach. But hunger wasn't just physical. It was the fear of not knowing when the next meal would come. The instinct to take food when it was offered because offers could be withdrawn. Yes, ma'am, she said. Good. Come on in. I've got soup on the stove and corn bread in the oven. The house smelled like home. Not Lorelei's home. Not the house on Meadowbrook Lane that smelled like fear and silence, and the particular staleness that came from windows that were never opened. But someone's home. A real home, where people cooked and laughed and lived lives that didn't revolve around survival. Carol showed her the guest room, small like she'd said, but clean, a twin bed with a quilt that looked handmade, a nightstand with a lamp, a window that looked out onto the backyard, a door that closed and Lorelei noted immediately locked from the inside. Bathrooms across the hall, Carol said. Towels are in the closet. You need anything, I'm just down the hall in the room at the end. Door's always open. Thank you, Lorelei said. Carol smiled. You're welcome, sweetheart. Take your time. Get settled. Come out when you're ready. She left, closed the door behind her but didn't latch it, leaving it cracked, giving Lorelei control over her own space while making it clear that help was available if needed. Lorelei sat on the bed. The mattress was soft. Too soft, maybe. She'd gotten used to the hard mattress at Vincent's, the one that was probably older than she was and had springs that poked through in places. This bed felt like luxury, felt wrong, felt like something she didn't deserve. She stood up, went to the window, tested it, locked. She unlocked it, opened it 3 inches. Cold air rushed in, just enough to remind her that escape was possible, that she wasn't trapped. Then she went to the door, tested the lock. It worked. Solid deadbolt that would hold against anyone trying to enter. Only after checking both exits did she let herself relax slightly. Only after confirming that she could leave or stay or lock herself in did the tension in her shoulders ease by the smallest fraction. She pulled the notebook from her jacket, set it on the nightstand. Physical reminder that the evidence existed, that she had proof, that she wasn't making this up. Then she went to find Carol. The kitchen was warm and bright. Carol stood at the stove stirring something in a pot. Country music played softly from a radio on the counter. Normal Sunday afternoon sounds, the kind of sounds that existed in houses where people felt safe. Soup's almost ready, Carol said without turning around. You like chicken noodle? Or I've got tomato, if you prefer. Chicken noodle is good, thank you. Carol ladled soup into a bowl, set it on the table, added a plate with 2 pieces of cornbread, a glass of milk, a napkin. Eat as much as you want, Carol said. No rules about portions here, no locked refrigerators. You're hungry, you eat. That's simple. Lorelei sat down, looked at the food, at the generosity that came without conditions, at kindness that felt genuine instead of performative. She picked up her spoon and ate. Carol sat across from her with her own bowl, ate quietly, didn't ask questions, didn't push for conversation, just shared the space in the meal and let Lorelei set the pace. After a while, Carol said, Margaret tells me you're smart, real smart, the way you figured out what Vincent was planning. Lorelei didn't know how to respond to that. Being smart had never helped her before. Being smart just meant understanding exactly how much danger she was in. Understanding didn't save you. Action did. I just paid attention, she said. That's more than most people do, adults included. Carol took a bite of cornbread. I've been fostering kids for 11 years, seen a lot of them come through here, different situations, different traumas, but they all have one thing in common. What's that? They're survivors. Every single one takes a special kind of strength to keep going when the world's trying to break you. You've got that strength. Anyone can see it. Lorelei set her spoon down. I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Carol's voice was gentle. You can be both, strong and tired, brave and scared, surviving and struggling. That's what strength looks like in real life. Not the stories where heroes never cry and always know what to do. Real strength is getting up every day even when you don't want to, even when you don't know how. Lorelei felt tears starting. She pressed her palms against her eyes, refusing to cry. Crying was weakness. Weakness was vulnerability. Vulnerability was, it's okay to cry here, Carol said quietly. This house has seen plenty of tears. Every kid who stayed here has cried at some point. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing shameful about it. Sometimes tears are just how the body releases what it can't hold anymore. Lorelei's shoulders shook. The tears came despite her best efforts to stop them. 2 years of holding everything inside. 2 years of being strong because strength was survival, and survival was all that mattered. Carol didn't move to hug her, didn't reach across the table, just sat there with her own tears running quietly down her face and let Lorelei cry without trying to fix it or stop it or make it about anything other than what it was. A 6-year-old child finally safe enough to fall apart. When the tears stopped, Carol handed her a tissue. Lorelei wiped her face, blew her nose, felt hollowed out and exhausted and somehow lighter than she'd felt in months. Better, Carol asked. I think so. Good. Finish your soup, then you can rest. Or watch TV, or just sit, whatever you need. Lorelei finished her soup, the cornbread, the milk. Then she went back to the guest room and lay down on the too soft bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to understand that she was safe, that Vincent couldn't get to her here, that tomorrow existed and she would be alive to see it. She fell asleep with the door cracked and the window unlocked and the notebook on the nightstand where she could reach it if she needed proof that this was real. Monday morning came too early and too bright. Lorelei woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon cooking and the disorienting realization that she was somewhere that wasn't Vincent's house. She sat up, took inventory, guest room, Carol's house, safe, for now. Someone knocked on the door, gentle, 3 soft taps. Lori, you awake? Carol's voice. Breakfast is ready when you are, no rush. Lorelei got up, used the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror. The face staring back was thinner than she remembered. Older than 6 should look. Eyes that had seen too much. She went to the kitchen. Carol was setting the table. Bacon, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Sleep okay? Carol asked. Yes, ma'am. Any nightmares? Lorelei hesitated. She'd had 3, each one featuring Vincent finding her, taking her back, finishing what he'd started. But saying that out loud felt like admitting weakness. Some, she said finally. Carol nodded. That's normal. They'll get better with time. Won't go away completely. Trauma doesn't work like that, but they'll get less frequent, less intense. They sat down to eat. Lorelei was halfway through her eggs when she heard an engine outside. Deep rumble, unmistakable. Motorcycle. She went very still. Carol looked toward the window. That'll be Jackson. Said he'd come by this morning, check on you. Lorelei stood up, went to the window, watched Ghost pull into the driveway on a black Harley that looked like it had been around longer than she had. He shut off the engine. Silence rushed back in. He sat there for a moment before getting off the bike, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body hurt, but who'd learned not to show it. Carol opened the door before he knocked. Jackson, come in. Coffee. Appreciate it. Ghost stepped inside, filled the doorway in a way that should have been threatening but somehow wasn't. His eyes found Lorelei immediately. Scanned her face, looking for something. Damage maybe, or confirmation that she was okay. Hey kid, he said. Hi. He sat at the table. Carol poured coffee, black, no sugar. He wrapped his hands around the mug and looked at Lorelei with those steady Riverstone eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so." "Sleep?" "Some." "Eat?" "Yes." Ghost nodded, took a sip of coffee, set the mug down. "Vincent's lawyer contacted Margaret last night," he said, not sugarcoating it, not trying to protect her from information, just stating facts. "Edward Finch, expensive guy, works out of Billings. He wants to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" Carol asked. "Terms. Vincent's willing to plead guilty to some charges if we drop others. Wants to avoid trial, wants to minimize prison time." Lorelei felt something cold move through her chest. He gets to negotiate after everything he did. "That's how the system works," Ghost said. His voice was flat, not defending it, just explaining it. "Prosecutors don't want trials if they can avoid them. Trials are expensive, time-consuming, risk of acquittal. Plea deals are easier, faster, guaranteed conviction even if the sentence is lighter." "So he wins." "No." Ghost's voice was hard. "He doesn't win. He loses his freedom, loses his reputation, loses you. That's not winning. That's consequences. Just not as many consequences as he deserves." Margaret arrived at 10, set up her laptop on Carol's dining room table, explained what was happening in language that didn't condescend but didn't confuse. "Vincent's lawyer has proposed a plea deal," she said. "Vincent pleads guilty to conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, child endangerment, and providing false statements to medical professionals. In exchange, the prosecution drops the attempted murder charge." "Why would they do that?" Lorelei asked. "Because attempted murder is hard to prove. We have the insurance policy. We have the timeline. We have the recordings. But proving that Vincent took specific actions intended to cause your death is complicated. Did he starve you? Yeah. Did he create conditions that endangered your health? Yeah. Can we prove beyond reasonable doubt that he intended for those conditions to kill you within a specific time frame? Maybe. Maybe not. But the recordings are conversations, plans, intent. But intent is an action. The prosecution would need to show that Vincent took concrete steps to kill you, and a defense lawyer would argue that everything Vincent did could be explained as neglect. Terrible neglect, criminal neglect, but not murder. Lorelei felt the familiar helplessness creeping back, the sense that the truth didn't matter, that evidence didn't matter, that Vincent would find a way to escape real consequences because he always did. Ghost must have seen it on her face because he leaned forward. "Listen to me," he said. "The charges he's pleading to carry 15 to 25 years. Minimum. He'll be in his 60s when he gets out. His life is over. His reputation is destroyed. He loses everything. That's justice. Not perfect justice, but justice." "What about Beverly?" Lorelei asked. "The insurance woman, his partner." "Federal charges," Margaret said. "Separate case. She's looking at 15 years minimum. She's cooperating, giving testimony against Vincent. Probably trying to reduce her sentence, but it won't help much. The FBI has her computer, her files, her calendar with your death circled on it." Lorelei absorbed this. Vincent in prison, Beverly in prison, the plan destroyed, the threat eliminated. "What happens to me?" she asked quietly. Margaret and Ghost exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. "That's complicated," Margaret said. "You need a permanent placement. Carol is emergency foster, temporary, while we sort out long-term options." "What are the options?" Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother is alive," Margaret said gently. "In Spokane. Jennifer Harper. She left when you were 3. She's been trying to find you for the past 8 months. Vincent told her you died. Car accident. She believed him." The world tilted slightly. Lorelei gripped the edge of the table. "My mother," she said slowly, "is alive." "Yes." "And she's been looking for me." "Yes." Lorelei's mind raced. Her mother, The woman who'd left her with Vincent, who'd abandoned her when she was 3, who'd chosen escape over protecting her daughter. Why did she leave? Lorelai asked. Vincent abused her physically, emotionally. She ran. She's not proud of leaving you behind. She thought he'd be a better parent without her there. Thought you'd be safer. She was wrong. She was wrong, Lorelai repeated. Flat voice, no emotion. Because feeling it would break her and she couldn't break. Not now, not when she was so close to actual safety. She wants to talk to you, Margaret said. When you're ready, not now, not today, but eventually. She's been sober 18 months, has an apartment, of course. She's trying to build a life that has room for you in it. Does she know what Vincent did? She saw the news, called me. We talked for an hour. She knows everything. Lorelai stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the backyard where nothing was happening. Just grass and trees and normalcy that felt alien. Her mother was alive, had been alive this whole time, had been in Spokane living some other life while Lorelai was on Meadowbrook Lane documenting her own murder case in a notebook hidden under her mattress. I don't want to see her, Lorelai said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's your choice, Margaret said. No one's going to force you. What are my other options? Long-term foster care, possibly adoption if we find the right family. Or, she stopped, glanced at Ghost. Ghost was looking at his coffee, not at Lorelai, not at Margaret, just at the dark liquid in the white mug like it held answers. Or what? Lorelai prompted. Or I could file for guardianship, Ghost said quietly, still not looking at her. Temporary at first, 6 months. See how it goes. If it works, we make it permanent. If it doesn't, we find something else. Lorelai turned from the window, stared at him. This dangerous man with the scarred face and the motorcycle, and the leather vest that proclaimed his membership in an outlaw club. This stranger who'd said yes when everyone else said no. You want to be my guardian, she asked. Want is complicated, Ghost said. He finally looked at her, those hard eyes softer than she'd seen them. But I think you need someone who's not going to leave, someone who keeps promises, someone who understands what it's like to survive something that should have killed you. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you're smart. I know you're brave. I know you walked 17 miles in the middle of the night to save your own life. I know you documented 2 years of abuse because you understood that evidence matters. I know you stood up to Vincent in a diner full of people and didn't back down. He paused. I had a son, he said. Caleb, he died 3 years ago. Overdose, 28 years old. I wasn't there when he needed me. Wasn't the father I should have been. I can't fix that. Can't bring him back. But maybe I can show up for someone who needs showing up for. Lorelai felt tears starting again. She was so tired of crying, but the tears came anyway. I don't need a savior, she said. Good, because I'm not one. I'm just a guy who knows what it's like to be failed by every adult who was supposed to protect you. Who knows what it's like to survive anyway? Who thinks maybe 2 people who understand that could help each other? Lorelai crossed back to the table, sat down, looked at Ghost with those 2 old eyes. I have rules, she said. Okay. No locked refrigerators, ever. I eat when I'm hungry. No portions, no restrictions. Agreed. I check the locks at night. All of them. Every door, every window. That's not negotiable. Understood. I keep my notebook. No one reads it without permission. No one throws it away. It's mine. It's yours. And you don't lie to me. Not about small things, not about big things, not ever. If you don't want to answer something, you say so, but you don't lie. Ghost met her eyes, held them. I don't lie, he said, not to people I care about. And I'm starting to care about you, kid. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the Clearwater County Courthouse. Margaret drove. Ghost rode his bike. Lorelei sat in the back seat of the Lexus and watched the mountains go past and tried not to throw up from nerves. The courthouse was old stone, built in 1923, according to the plaque by the door. Inside smelled like floor wax and old paper and the particular mustiness that came from 100 years of legal proceedings. Vincent was already there when they arrived, sitting in the hallway outside the courtroom with his lawyer. Edward Finch was exactly what Lorelei expected. Expensive suit, perfect hair, briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. The kind of lawyer who made his money getting guilty people lighter sentences. Vincent looked up when Lorelei walked in, made eye contact. For just a second, his mask slipped. Not all the way, just enough that Lorelei saw the calculation underneath. The cold assessment of whether he could still win this, whether his lawyer was good enough, whether the judge would believe a 6-year-old or a respectable CPA with no prior record. Then the mask was back. The concerned father, the wrongly accused man. Lorelei looked away first, not because she was scared, because looking at him made her angry, and anger made her reckless, and she needed to be smart today. Needed to be the version of herself who documented evidence and made escape plans and survived. They entered the courtroom, small room, wood paneling, Montana state flag in the corner, American flag beside it, judge's bench at the front, tables for prosecution and defense, gallery with seats for observers. Ghost sat in the gallery, tiny beside him, 5 other brothers from the MC, silent support, physical presence, reminder that Lorelei wasn't alone. Judge Patterson entered. Everyone stood. He was older, late 60s, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. The kind of judge who'd been doing this long enough that he'd seen every lie and didn't have patience for any of them. "Be seated," he said. His voice was gravelly, tired. The voice of someone who'd spent 40 years listening to people make excuses for terrible behavior. The prosecutor went first, laid out the charges, the evidence, the insurance policy, the recordings, the medical records showing 2 different stories about Lorelei's amputation, the testimony from Carolyn Westfield, the notebook with 2 years of documentation in a child's handwriting. Edward Finch objected repeatedly. The recordings were hearsay. The notebook was unreliable. A 6-year-old's memory couldn't be trusted. The insurance policy was standard practice for a responsible parent. Everything had an explanation that was innocent. Everything could be misunderstood. Then it was Margaret's turn. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Lorelei Ashford to testify." Lorelei stood, walked to the witness stand, put her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down in a chair that was too big for her so her feet didn't touch the ground. Judge Patterson looked at her over his reading glasses. "Miss Ashford," he said gently, "I'm going to ask you some questions. You answer honestly. If you don't understand something, you tell me. If you need a break, you tell me." "Okay." "Yes, sir." "How old are you?" "6. I'll be 7 on December 19th. "And where do you live?" "Right now, I'm staying with Carol Westfield. Before that, I lived at 247 Meadowbrook Lane with Vincent Marlowe." "Why aren't you living there anymore?" Lorelei took a breath. This was it. The moment where she either convinced a judge or didn't, where her testimony either mattered or was dismissed as the confused memories of a traumatized child. "Because Vincent was planning to kill me for the insurance money," she said. Clear voice, steady. "He took out a policy 22 months ago, $310,000. The contestability period ends in 6 weeks. After that, if I die, he gets the money and the insurance company can't investigate. He's been starving me, creating medical history that makes it look like I have health problems. So when I die, it seems natural, expected. Nobody asks questions." "That's a very serious accusation," Judge Patterson said. "Yes, sir, I know. That's why I documented it." She pulled the notebook from her jacket pocket, held it up. 2 years of notes, dates, times, what Vincent said, what Vincent did, what doctors said, what happened at hospitals, all of it. The judge took the notebook, started reading. His expression didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes. Something that looked like anger wrapped in judicial restraint. He read for 5 minutes. Complete silence in the courtroom. Just the sound of pages turning. The sound of a 6-year-old's handwriting that telling a story that should never have been written. When he finished, Judge Patterson set the notebook down carefully, looked at Lorelei. "Did anyone help you write this?" he asked. "No, sir. I did it myself." "Did anyone tell you what to write?" "No, sir. I wrote what I saw, what I heard, what happened." "Why did you start keeping notes?" Lorelei thought about that. Tried to remember being 5 years old and making the decision to document her own abuse without fully understanding why. "Because nobody was asking me what happened," she said finally. "They asked Vincent. Believe Vincent. I was there. I knew the truth, but nobody wanted to hear it. So I wrote it down. I thought maybe someday someone would ask, would want to know my version instead of just his." Judge Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "Tell me about your leg," he said gently. So Lorelei did. Told him about the stairs, about Vincent throwing her, about the hospital, about the doctor with glasses who saw Vincent's hand squeezing her wrist and wrote something down and walked away. About the second hospital and the change story and the way lies became truth when the right person told them. She told him about the locked refrigerator, about counting the hours between meals, about learning to survive on so little food that her body started eating itself, about understanding that Vincent was waiting for her to die and deciding that she wouldn't, that she'd run first. She told him everything. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Edward Finch had stopped objecting, had stopped trying to poke holes in her testimony, had just sat there listening with an expression that suggested even he was having trouble defending his client against a 6-year-old's truth. Judge Patterson leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "Mr. Marlowe," he said, "stand up." Vincent stood, composed, controlled, still playing the role of wrongly accused father. "I've been on this bench for 38 years, Judge Patterson said. I've seen abuse cases, neglect cases, cases that made me want to quit this job and find something that didn't involve seeing what people do to children. But I have never in nearly 4 decades seen documentation like this. I have never seen a child with the presence of mind to build their own case file, to research the legal framework of their own murder, to plan and execute an escape with this level of strategic thinking." He put his glasses back on. "The evidence is overwhelming. The recordings, the insurance policy, the medical discrepancies, the testimony from multiple witnesses, and most damning of all, this notebook. 2 years of a child's handwriting telling a story that is consistent, detailed, and utterly devastating." Vincent's mask was cracking. Lorelei could see it, the edges starting to fray, the performance becoming harder to maintain. "I'm granting the emergency protective order," Judge Patterson said. "Permanent. Vincent Marlowe is prohibited from any contact with Lorelei Ashford. Direct or indirect. No phone calls, no letters, no third-party messages. Violation will result in immediate arrest and additional charges." He looked at Margaret. "Ms. Brennan, I understand you have a petition for guardianship." "Yes, Your Honor. Jackson Reeves is petitioning for temporary guardianship, 6 months initially, with the option to extend or make permanent based on the child's well-being and preference." Judge Patterson looked at Ghost in the gallery. Ghost stood up, walked to the front, stood beside Margaret. "Mr. Reeves," the judge said, "you understand what you're taking on." "Yes, sir." "This child has experienced significant trauma. She'll need therapy, medical care, patience, stability. The court will be monitoring the placement closely. Any sign that she's not thriving, we revisit the arrangement." "Understood." "Understood. Why do you want to do this?" Ghost looked at Lorelei, then back at the judge. "Because 38 people said no," he said quietly, "and someone needed to say yes." Judge Patterson nodded slowly. "Temporary guardianship granted, 6 months. Review hearing in January. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. It was over. Vincent was escorted out by deputies. his lawyer following, his mask finally broken, his face showing the rage and calculation and cold fury of a man who'd lost everything. Lorelei sat in the witness stand and felt the weight of 2 years lifting, not gone. Trauma didn't work like that, but lighter, bearable, shared with people who believed her. Ghost approached the stand, held out his hand. Lorelei took it. Let him help her down. Let him be the person who showed up, who kept promises, who said yes. You ready to go home? He asked. Home. The word felt foreign, unfamiliar. Lorelei had lived in houses, structures, buildings, but home was something else. Home was safety, stability, people who stayed. Where's home? She asked. My place, if you want. 40 acres, mountain view, 3 bedrooms. One of them needs clearing out, but we can do that together. Lorelei thought about that, thought about a house that wasn't Vincent's, a room that was hers, a life that wasn't measured in survival calculations and escape plans. Okay, she said, let's go home. 3 months later, Lorelei stood in what used to be Caleb's room and was now hers. The walls were freshly painted, light blue, her choice. The bed was new, twin size with a quilt that Ghost's sister had made. The desk was old but solid, good for homework, good for writing. The only thing remaining from Caleb's time was a single drawing, framed now, hanging on the wall, a motorcycle sketch done in pencil by a 10-year-old boy who'd loved his father and died too young. Ghost had cried when they hung it. Real tears. The kind that came from grief that had found a place to live instead of just destroying you. He would have liked you, Ghost had said. Would have thought you were cool. Would have wanted to teach you to draw. Lorelei had touched the frame gently. I wish I could have met him. Me too, kid. Me too. Now Lorelei sat at her desk and opened a new notebook. Not the old one with the evidence. That was stored safely in Margaret's office. Evidence for appeals, for parole hearings that would come years from now when Vincent tried to argue he'd served enough time and deserved freedom. This notebook was different. Clean pages, no trauma documentation, just space for thoughts, for homework, for the drawings she was learning to do in therapy. She wrote the date at the top of the first page, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Ghost had made pancakes that morning, burned them slightly. They'd laughed about it. Day 94 with Jackson, she wrote. Still doing the lock check every night. He never complains, never suggests I don't need to. Just walks the house with me. Front door, back door, all the windows. Then says goodnight and means it. She paused, thought about what else to say. I saw Mom yesterday, third supervised visit. It's still weird. She cries a lot, says sorry a lot. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her for leaving. But Jackson says forgiveness isn't required for healing. Says I can be angry and still move forward. Says feelings are complicated and that's okay. School is good. Mrs. Patterson helped me catch up on the work I missed. I'm ahead in most subjects now. Reading especially. I read 5 books last week. Ghost says I'm going to run out of library books at this rate. The nightmares are less frequent. Still happen. Probably always will. But they're manageable. And when I wake up scared, I can hear Ghost down the hall. Awake usually. Reading or watching TV. Never sleeping much. I think he has nightmares too. We don't talk about it, but we understand each other. She stopped writing, heard the motorcycle in the driveway. Ghost was home from the MC Clubhouse. Weekly meeting. He never missed them, but he never stayed late anymore either. Always home by 8. Always there if she needed him. The door open, closed. Sound of boots being removed. Jacket being hung up. Lori, Ghost called. You want dinner? Yeah, I'll be right there. She closed the notebook, stood up, used her crutches to navigate to the kitchen, where Ghost was pulling leftovers from the refrigerator that was never locked. That would never be locked as long as she lived in this house. They ate together at the small kitchen table, talked about nothing important. School, weather, whether they should get a dog. Normal conversation, normal life. The kind of normal that Lorelai had never experienced and was still learning to trust. After dinner, they did the lock check, their nightly ritual, testing every door, every window, confirming that the house was secure, that she was safe. Front door, Lorelai prompted. Locked. Ghost confirmed. Back door. Locked. Kitchen window. Locked. Bedroom windows. All locked. Okay, I'm safe. You're safe. Lorelai went to her room, changed into pajamas, brushed her teeth, got into bed with a new quilt that smelled like fabric softener instead of fear. Ghost appeared in this doorway, didn't come in, just stood there like he did every night, checking, making sure she was okay. You good? He asked. Yeah, I'm good. Need anything? No, but Jackson, yeah. Thank you for saying yes, for keeping your promises, for being here. Ghost was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Thank you for asking, he said, for trusting me, for giving me a second chance at this. He turned off the light, left the door cracked. Lorelai heard him walk down the hall to his own room, heard the familiar sounds of him settling in for the night. She lay in the darkness and thought about the diner, about the 38 people who'd said no, about the one person who'd said yes, about how a single choice could change everything. She thought about Vincent in prison, about Beverly in her separate facility, about justice that wasn't perfect but was real, about consequences that came slowly but came. She thought about her mother in Spokane, about forgiveness that might come or might not, about healing that happened whether you forgave or didn't. But mostly she thought about this moment, this room, this house, this life that was hers, that was safe, that was real. 4 months ago, she'd walked 17 miles through Montana darkness on one leg and two broken crutches because survival was all that mattered. Now survival was just the baseline, the starting point. Now she got to think about things like what to be when she grew up, what books to read, whether to get a dong, what to draw next. Now she got to be a kid, not just a survivor, not just a victim, not just a case file or a testimony or a tragedy that people whispered about. Just Lorelai Grace Ashford, 6 years old, almost 7, living with ghosts in a house in Montana where the doors locked and the refrigerator stayed open and promises were kept. She fell asleep with the door cracked and the window unlocked and the notebook on her nightstand full of new stories instead of old trauma. And down the hall, Jackson Ghost Reeves sat in his own room, looking at a photo of Caleb at age 10, smiling, alive, before the drugs, before the pain, before everything went wrong. I'm trying, Ghost whispered to the photo. I'm showing up this time. I'm being the person I should have been for you. I hope that counts for something. The photo didn't answer, but Ghost thought maybe somewhere Caleb knew, and maybe somewhere he approved. Ghost set the photo down, went to check the locks one more time, just to be sure, just because Lorelai needed to know they were secure, and he promised to check, and he kept his promises now. He returned to his room, lay down, closed his eyes, thought about a diner on Route 12 where a 6-year-old girl had asked the simplest question in the world and changed 2 lives with 8 words. Can I sit with you just for a little while? Yes, Ghost thought. You can sit with me for as long as you need, for as long as this lasts, for as long as it takes for you to understand that some people stay. Some people keep showing up. Some people mean it when they say yes. Outside, snow began to fall on the Montana mountains, soft and quiet, covering everything clean, making the world new again. Inside, 2 survivors slept in separate rooms with doors cracked and promises kept. And somewhere in a diner that was closed for the night, the back booth sat empty, waiting for the next Sunday morning, the next person who needed help, the next question that would change everything. The booth would always be there, ready, willing to be the place where someone said yes when everyone else said no, because that's what it was for. That's what it would always be for, the last booth, where hope went to be found, where survival became living, where 8 words could save a life. Can I sit with you, Jess? Always yes.